Hi, I'm Peter Reinhardt, and welcome to the Johnson & Wales International Symposium on Bread. I'm coming to you from the Hance Auditorium in Charlotte, North Carolina, where we've held the last 4 bread symposiums, and as you can see, there's nobody here but me. And this is where we usually have it. The seats are all empty because this year, thanks to you, the symposium will be presented online, virtually, in our new presentation hall, which is where I will join you in just a minute. Thank you, and thanks for being part of our new virtual Johnson & Wales International Symposium on Bread, presented by Puratos. Welcome again. Throughout the entire symposium, I'll be thanking our generous sponsors over and over again, and ask that you do as well by visiting their booths and pavilions in the exhibitor hall. There you will see lots of bonus content, and you can also make appointments to meet with the folks from these companies that serve our baking community so well. Our presenting sponsor is Puratos, who has partnered with us from the very beginning for all of our symposiums, and it is their support that helped us get this one-of-a-kind gathering of thought leaders off the ground. Please also visit our fabulous flour and milling sponsors, Ardent Mills, Lindley Mills, and Central Milling. Thank you also to our equipment sponsors, the WP Bakery Group and Allied Bakery and Food Service Equipment. And thank you also to our specialty food product companies, Probiotine, Fire Within, Big Green Egg, and Mock Mill. Please check out all of their booths to learn about their wonderful and unique products. And also thanks to our media sponsors, Cook's Country, The Local Palate, the James Beard Foundation, and the Bread Bakers Guild of America. You'll be hearing more about all of them throughout the entire series of presentations. So again, thank you to all our sponsors. At the end of today's presentation, you will also see our credit scroll, thanking all of the people behind the scenes who made this event possible, including our production and technical partner, Ganoid Communications, our creative team at Gumbo Marketing, and the many folks at Johnson & Wales University, our hosts for this, our 4th annual gathering. So stick around, if you will. But now, it's time to get things rolling with today's presentation, so let's go live. And once again, welcome to the Johnson & Wales International Symposium on Bread, presented by Puratos. And here I am live from the same spot that I just left you from, in my office in Charlotte, North Carolina. Surrounded by my security blankets of books and even my big giant Poilâne Miche pillow, which I will be hugging throughout this entire presentation. Those of you who were with us on Mondays got to meet Apollonia Poilâne and hear her story and see her breads. And today we're going to be kind of back here in the States with what will be our very first Wednesday event, and we'll be doing Wednesday events throughout the year that are all about baking like the pros. And our pro to help us kick this off today is the award-winning baker Graison Gill, coming from Bellegarde Bakery in New Orleans, NOLA. And Graison, I'm going to throw it over to you. Your bio is on our site. I'm not going to spend any time kind of telling all about you because it's there for people to read, and I want you to have maximum time. You're going to be doing a demo today. We've got about 45 minutes for the demo. We're going to leave some time for Q&A, and then a reminder to those of you who do have the VIP passes to join us at the beginning of the next hour in the VIP lounge for a more casual Q&A session and networking time with Graison himself. So with that said, again, thank you all for being here today. Graison, I'm going to drop off the screen and throw it to you. It's all yours.
Thank you very much, Peter, and thanks again to everyone that organized the conference and put all the hard work into doing it, for inviting me and having me do the first demo. So hopefully the bar is not too low, but I think that we're going to have fun today And glad that everybody is patient with the second year of digital conferences and digital classes and all the stuff that's been disrupted because of the pandemic. So again, I'm grateful to everybody for taking time out to attend today, and then also really, really thankful to the people that put in all the hard work behind the scenes at Johnson & Wales to make all of this possible. So as Peter mentioned, my name is Graison. I am the owner of Bellegarde Bakery in New Orleans, Louisiana. Kind of like BP before the pandemic, we were primarily a wholesale bakery, doing about 10,000 loaves of bread a week for local supermarkets, restaurants, cafes, wine shops, all sorts of things. So about 10,000 loaves a week, 6 days a week. And we also were milling about 5,000 pounds of flour a week that we were mostly using ourselves, but also selling locally to other restaurants and bakeries, and using for our bread, pastries, and pasta. And then all of that obviously got very disrupted by the pandemic. So I'm sure, like a lot of people on the demo call today, we are still kind of finding the middle ground between who we were and what we were doing and what we need to be after the pandemic. So it's been a really tough year for us emotionally, financially, just like it has been for everybody else as well too. So I'm glad that no matter everything that we've been through, I think all of our passions for bread and for baking and for pastry and for grains and for flour and for milling has really kind of come through despite it all. So that's something that I'm really grateful for, and somebody that, as being someone also that attends talks, whether it's for the symposium or other things that have been going on with the guild since the pandemic started. I'm really grateful again to the people that make these things possible. So the guild, Peter, Johnson, Wales, just again, really thank you to you guys for being the organizers, and to everyone behind you that makes the bureaucracy of all this work. I'm really thankful for y'all. And again, I think it helps keep people like me, it keeps our passion buoyant in times that have been so trying, like they have been since, I guess, March 14th of last year. All right, so with all that said, today we're going to do a brief demo for about 40 minutes, as Peter said, and then do some questions afterwards, and then jump into the office to do a Q&A in the VIP room, the VIP digital room, which will be my office. And I actually have a class today at the bakery that starts at 5 p.m. Central Time. So I've got about 30 minutes for the Q&A in the office, and then I need to split, but hopefully people can reach out to me via the conference organizing messaging system. You can find more information if you're ever in New Orleans about Bellegarde at bellegardebakery.com. And then I'm also working on some digital classes as well, which is going to be on a website under my name, which is graisongill.com. And we'll be having some digital recipes and digital classes on that website. And then we teach at Bellegarde about twice a month. And if you're ever in New Orleans, hopefully you can catch a class or come by for pizza or for bread anytime you are down here. So with that said, I wanted to do something really unique today. I've been baking for 12 years, and I've been baking in New Orleans for 12 years. And I've always been really in love and inspired by and motivated by the confluence of cultures here, not just in New Orleans, but in Louisiana as well too. So for those of you who don't know, European colonization began in Louisiana about 320 years ago. And of course, there's incredible native culture that preceded that. And there was just a real kaleidoscope of cultures and peoples and traditions that immigrated to New Orleans and Louisiana throughout the past few centuries. And as I'm sure everybody on the demo call knows, the food and the traditions and the foodways of New Orleans are world renowned. One problem that I've noticed since I began baking here is, even though we have a very famous cuisine, we don't really have the ingredients which make that cuisine possible. And being a baker, the formative ingredient in what I do and what we do is flour. So as the bakery got older and older, I became more and more committed to using and sourcing and finding the best flour possible. And that started me off using incredible flour from Jennifer Lapidus at Carolina Ground, using incredible stuff from Glenn Roberts and the team at Anson Mills in Columbia, South Carolina. And then that kind of devolved into us getting our own flour mills. And when we moved to our current bakery about 2 years ago, we bought 2 40-inch stone mills from Andrew at New American Stone Mills out in Vermont. And as I mentioned earlier, we were milling about 5,000 pounds of flour a week for ourselves and for some other local customers before the pandemic. So for me, it's critical because bread is such a simple thing when it comes to its ingredients of flour, water, and salt. But you really start with the ingredients. And of course, using freshly stone milled whole grain flour, to me, is the best way to be the best shepherd and the best midwife to create incredible bread that's not only delicious, but is also really nutritious and flavorful as well too. So today what I'm going to be doing is kind of like a mashup. I'm going to be taking the baguette. So I've got a few of these here, and I'm put a bunch of native and African and European ingredients and kind of welded those all together with the European tradition of a baguette, the French tradition of a baguette. And again, I just wanted to kind of have that culture clash and also that kind of dialogue, so to speak, between the different ingredients to use the form of the baguette as something that is tried and true and is, you know, French in origin, but something that incorporates all the really unique and beautiful produce, ingredients, farmers, and the stories that they have in the Deep South into a baguette form. So what I used today for this was flour from quite a few places. I got a lot of the flour from Anson Mills. I got some really beautiful and incredible blue corn flour. I got some really incredible peanut flour from Oliver Farms in Georgia. I got some really nice hominy grits from Anson Mills in South Carolina. And I used some incredible oils from Oliver Farm in Georgia. It's Clay Oliver. It's using some cold press style for his oils rather, and making some really incredible oils, making a bene seed oil, which is an heirloom sesame seed that was brought to the States from Africa. It's really delicious, really nutritious, really incredible. He's doing an okra oil, pumpkin seed oil, con oil, and sunflower seed oil. So Oliver Farms, their stuff is really unbelievable. And then I'm also using today some cane syrup from West Louisiana. So for those of you who don't know, Louisiana has a huge sugarcane tradition and agricultural industry. But unfortunately, all that sugar is typically commodity. It's full of pesticides and other kind of trash. So we worked with some really incredible sugar growers, a third generation sugar grower in South Louisiana, the Romero family, and their company is called Three Brothers Farm. They have an incredible cane syrup, an incredible raw Louisiana cane sugar that's organic. And there's also an incredible guy named Charles Poirier that's been making cane syrup the old way in his home in South Louisiana for about 20 years. And he's out of cane syrup for this current harvest, but he'll have some more in the upcoming harvest. So be sure to check him out, and Three Brothers Farm. So I'm using all of their flours in this baguette. So it's going to be a peanut flour, the heirloom white wheat flour from Anson Mills, the okra oil from Oliver Farms, a little bit of sourdough, a little bit of that cane syrup for some sweetening components to it. And I fermented the dough overnight. I mixed it in a planetary mixer in kind of a Hobart. Got a batch of the dough right here. So I don't know how well it's translating on the camera, but it's got a really beautiful kind of blue hue to it. And the blue hue is coming from that blue corn flour that I got from Anson Mills. And I also use those hominy grits that I brought up earlier on the camera as well. So what I did is I chose not to soak the grits or to do anything with them or make a porridge, because I really like the texture that the raw grits gives to the dough. I've got one of the baguettes cut open right here, so you can maybe see some of the white grits kind of pockmarked throughout there. But again, I like the texture that they provide, and I think putting them into a porridge would kind of take away from that mouthfeel. So I like adding those grits whole. The peanut flour, again, just kind of added another component to the overall dialogue of the flavor, so to speak, within the baguette, as did a little pinch of the okra flour, peanut flour, same reason. And then I used the white wheat from Anson Mills to kind of carry it throughout, and a little bit of AP flour from King Arthur just to provide a little bit of body. And I mixed the dough in the planetary mixer, did a simple 20-minute autolyse, and then a 5-minute mix on first speed, 3 folds, both fermented for 60 minutes at room temp, and then I put it in the fridge for about 22 hours and pulled them out to shape them today. We will have the recipe for y'all to look at if you want. Within a few days, I'll get it to Peter and we'll have it posted up in case anybody wants to look at it, share it. But again, I'm motivated because I'm in such a unique place and have been for such a long time, and I'm very thankful and blessed to be so. I'm always motivated by what's available, around us, maybe not necessarily immediately, but within our region. So as opposed to doing something a little bit more traditional, I wanted to kind of take the confluence of all the cultures and things that, and the people that have made New Orleans what it is, and make something really unique with some of the few people left in our region that are doing really incredible work when it comes to grains and to oil. So that's what we have today. The Diaspora Baguette, I'm calling it, with the corn flour, the okra oil, peanut oil, and beautiful, beautiful native blue corn from Graison Mills. All right. So with that said, I'm going to shape a few of the baguettes off of the dough that I had set aside. Then I'm going to bake a few of the baguettes that I had pre-shaped already. And then y'all can see that I have quite a few of the loaves already baked off. So we'll do a quick tasting with those as well too. And hopefully wrap up with enough time to do some questions. I'm not going to scale these for the camera because we're just doing it, in-house today. But I scaled the other ones that I did earlier today, the ones on the cutting board of 500 grams. It's a little bit bigger than our normal baguettes here at Bellegarde, but I feel like these with the corn flour and then need some good structure to them. So having them be a little bit shorter than maybe your traditional baguette and a little bit more kind of stockier allows, I think, the dough to kind of hold and lift that heavy grit, and also to kind of lift up that cornmeal as well too. So about 500 grams is good. I'm going to do a really tight pre-shape, and I'm not going to let it rest too long on the bench, not only because it's really hot here in New Orleans, but also because I don't want these baguettes to go over. They've been in the fridge for approaching 24 hours now. So I want to get to them. And then, as I said earlier, we have a few shapes that we're going to be baking off as well too. All right. And in terms of the composition of the dough, I'm going to hopefully have some time to talk about it later, because I really enjoyed Apollonia's conversation with Kim, which I watched yesterday because I couldn't attend the live one. And she was talking about a cornbread that she made, which sounded wonderful, and really liked where she was coming from with the explanation and the intention behind that. So I wanted to talk, if I have some time, about that a little bit later, but just briefly, the composition on this dough is it's about 20% non-gluten flour. So that cocktail blend of the peanut flour, the blue corn flour, and the the hominy grits. Those are about 20% of the overall weight. The AP flour is about 15%. And then the balance of the flours, it's called the French Mediterranean white wheat flour from Graison Mills. So to give you an idea, it's a majority wheat dough. So it has that kind of that body and that structure. But again, really kind of getting incredible flavors out of it with the addition of that okra oil, the peanut oil, the cane syrup, a small amount of cane syrup at about 3%. And then both of those oils together also at about 3%. Hydration with the water is 68%. So with the two oils and the water, the total hydration is 74%. And then with the exception of that AP flour, it's a whole grain dough. So 15% AP flour, and the rest of it's a whole grain dough. I like baguettes a little bit drier in terms of being able to shape them. So I like a baguette, depending on the flour composition, in the upper 60s or like the mid to low 70s. And as I said, this is in the mid 70s because of all that whole grain flour from Graison Mills, that white wheat flour. So I don't like baguettes too wet because they get a little bit difficult to shape. So I feel like it's a good kind of a middle ground to have a baguette hydration in like the mid 70s if it does have a lot of whole grain flour like this one does. And then I have the sourdough, the levain, at the flour weight is at 4%. So my climate, I'm sure, is a lot different than a lot of people on the demo today. So New Orleans and Louisiana are quite hot. The room temperature in the bakery today is 84 degrees. So things move a lot more quickly here. So 4% is what I'm doing for levain. And then I added yeast at like, I think 0.1%. So just a small amount of yeast that, again, kind of help carry the overall dough. And the acidity from the sourdough just really pairs beautifully with the cane syrup, with that sweetness, and then the texture from the corn, the color from the corn, and that peanut oil, along with the wheat flour, just really creates something that has a great mouthfeel, a great flavor, great aroma, and a great keeping quality. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and divide this dough. As I said earlier, I think about 500 grams is good for these. I'm just eyeballing for now, but the ones I did earlier were about 500. And also, when I add flours that don't contain gluten, I like to shape on the harder side, just in terms of shoring up that dough and making sure that it has really good body and really good structure. So I'm going to give these a pretty firm and pretty short pre-shape. More so than I would if it was just a plain wheat baguette. All right, so there's my 6 pre-shapes for the baguette. And then I'm gonna have Molly grab the camera and follow me over to our deck oven. We have 2 deck ovens here at Bellegarde. I'm gonna be baking 4 of these Diaspora baguettes in our electric deck oven. So if you have one of those at your bakery, I'm doing a 510 bottom heat and then like a 480 top heat. If for some reason you wanna bake these at home, I'd probably recommend about 475 on a home oven on a baking stone. And I'm gonna pop over to the oven now, okay? So as I said, I shaped these a few hours ago and then popped these 4 baguettes into the walk-in to let them kind of chill before the demo. But the proof is good. I'll have Molly get a close-up right before I load them of the color and the shaping for those of y'all that are interested in that. So again, you got a really beautiful kind of purple blue hue from that corn flour. I don't know if the camera's picking it up, but some really nice kind of flecks of that hominy grit, the white hominy grits. And do a proof check. It's, you know, holding my finger. Okay. All right, we'll go back to the big bench. We don't time anything here at Bellegarde in the terms of recipes and timers on the oven, so I just bake to color, and that's how we train people to bake here at the bakery. So I think these guys were in the oven for probably maybe about like 25-30 minutes. So I'm gonna check them, and hopefully by the time the demo is done, those will be out of the oven, so I can grab those and show everyone. I'm gonna give these a few more minutes to rest, the pre-shapes, but yeah, let's Let me talk a bit about Apollonia's talk yesterday, or not her talk, but she talked about corn. So for those of you that weren't able to catch that, I'd really recommend that you try to listen to her conversation with Kim. But it was great. I really enjoyed it. And Apollonia was talking about developing a cornbread, and obviously she's in Paris and in London, so corn is not necessarily something that's too like native or endemic ecologically or culturally in those places. So I was really impressed that she developed a cornbread recipe that didn't have any milk or sugar or other stuff, because she said she didn't want to make a brioche, she wanted to make a bread. I really liked that she wasn't kind of pandering to try to make the flavor more appealing, and really keeping it kind of strict as being a bread. And it was something too that she wanted to make 100% out of cornmeal. So for me, when it comes to these types of things, I like to, for lack of a better word, disrupt kind of the models that we have available to us. So the baguette, as I mentioned earlier, it's obviously a tried and true kind of form and model of a bread that I'm sure all of us bake or have baked at some point in our careers. It's something that we bake a lot of here at our. But what I like to do, because I feel like the rules of bread making, I think biologically can't really be broken. You know, you have to mix the flour, water, and salt. I guess you could admit salt, some sort of leavening agent. You have to ferment it, whether that's for a short time or for a long time. So for me, I really try to mess with so that kind of flour, water, salt, and bake. Don't feel like there's any really minds on how that works. Ingredients, kind of use your in order to make those models and recipes of bread. It's a self-portrait using ingredients from your region, your background, your family, and really believe wholeheartedly that an ingredient is something that can tell a story. So I like, again, to take a form that's familiar. So maybe that's like a pain de mie, maybe that's a baguette, maybe it's a plain country sourdough, as opposed to trying to disrupt the way that it's made, disrupt, so to speak, the ingredients that go into it and personalize those. So I like to highlight and use things within that form of kind of a consistent bread formula, but don't really have the headspace or the education to be able to change the formula, the processes around it. So again, like a baguette's a baguette, divide it, pre-shape it, roll it out, let it proof at room temp for an hour, hour and a half, score it a few times with the blade or make it epi with a pair of scissors. Like I'm not trying to like debate that or engage that or make that any different or make that any better. What I want to do is to try to evolve the flavors of it and what it is that I can put into it to make it more unique for myself, for my bakery, or for students that I'm teaching in a class. So again, was motivated for the demo today to use some incredible stuff from Anson Mills. And then I found out about the Oliver Farms in Georgia right before the symposium. So again, it's Oliver Farms in Georgia. They're doing cold pressed oils with everything that they grow on the farm. So that's bene, okra, peanut, sunflower seeds, pecans, really, really incredible stuff. And the flavors on the oils, because they're cold pressed, are really, really preserved. And they're really aromatic, really flavorful, and a little bit goes a long way. And also to talk about the ingredients as well too, I didn't want to jam the bread full of corn in order to get like a corn flavored or like a corn nuanced baguette, because not only would that affect the structure of having a really nice baguette like this, but I also wanted everything to kind of be in a little bit more harmony with itself in terms of the different ingredients. So I wanted the wheat to kind of have its presence felt. I wanted the levain to have its presence felt. I wanted a little bit of sweetness from the cane sugar, some of the fruitiness and the minerality from the oils, the peanuts, that kind of grassiness, and all that stuff. I wanted to have a bit of a conversation and a dialogue, so to speak, in the loaf of bread. And I like to achieve that by just adding a little bit of all of those things in order to make something that's more well-rounded, as opposed to something that kind of hits you over the head with salt, fat, sugar, sweet, whatever it may be. I don't want to use any makeup, or I want to conceal what the main ingredient is in any loaf of bread, which of course is flour. So every time that I bake, whether it's a demo for this or whether it's teaching students in class and have no experience baking, I always tell them that you don't want to put makeup and you don't want to mask the main ingredient in bread, which is flour. And I feel like people that add a lot of, salt, sugar, fat, sweetener, whatever it is, to a loaf of bread or to a pastry, I feel like they're not focusing on their main ingredient, which is flour. And that's the source of your flavors. So that's what I like to focus on. And I always like to nuance that main ingredient, that main flavor, with things kind of in percentages that are a little bit more nuanced as opposed to hitting you over the head with that. So again, I really try to achieve and seek harmony in flavors and dialogue of the flavor, so to speak. And I like to kind of think, not of myself, but as bakers, I like to think of us as bartenders, or I guess a mixologist if you're really hip these days, but somebody that just takes different components to make one thing that's very balanced and very nuanced. So I'd like to think that we can use different flours from all the incredible mills that are in the country now and become bartenders of bread and be able to achieve flavor through flour as opposed to achieve flavor through makeup, salt, fat, sugar, sweet, all of these types of things. So that was the intention behind using quite a few ingredients, but again, I feel like they're in really good harmony and I really think this bread came out well. It's unfortunately a casualty of the pandemic that we can't be, having this conversation in person and have some of y'all be able to taste this loaf of bread, but I got a really beautiful crumb. So the crumb is great if you're looking for that. I'm not really a big crumb person. That's not, to me, that's not the rubric of a good baker, and that's not what people should be heading for. But it did have a really nice crumb. It's got a beautiful caramelization on the crust, really beautiful color. And again, that texture is really wonderful from those grits and that nuance and the harmony of those different flavors coming from, whether it's the okra oil, the peanut flour, and that cane syrup. Really, really, really makes something beautiful and really, really unique in this baguette. Another ingredient that I forgot to mention that's pretty special to us and to what we do here at Bellegarde in New Orleans is that we use salt from Avery Island. So Avery Island, for those of you that don't know, is a place that's been making Tabasco since I think it's 1868. And geologically, Avery Island in Louisiana sits on a salt dome. So the Native Americans were harvesting salt there for thousands of years, and Tabasco was founded there because of the access to salt in order to make their hot sauce. And unfortunately, the salt mine got leased to Cargill quite a few decades ago. So local people didn't have access to the salt anymore. And it took me about 5 years of knocking on the door and making phone calls and emails and stuff like that in order to be able to use the salt in the bakery. But now for the past 4 to 5 years, we've been using the salt from Avery Island. Really thankful to be able to use it. It's a beautiful, pure salt, just pure sodium chloride. Completely natural right from the ground, and we load up the delivery van from the bakery, go there about 2 or 3 times a year, and drive away with 2,000 pounds of salt that we use in our breads here. So really thankful for that, and to be able to use a salt that's harvested about 2 hours away from the bakery here in New Orleans. All right, I'm gonna check on these baguettes, on the pre-shapes. They're still feeling a little bit stiff. I'll shape one and see how it feels, and if it's fighting me, I'm going to give it a few more minutes, but I'm going to be right back to grab a couche. Okay, we always dust with just plain like AP or white flour here at the bakery. Obviously, it makes a really beautiful contrast on the breads when they come out of the oven. But in case anyone was wondering, this is just a plain AP flour that I'm going to be dusting and shaping with, and that I put down on the couche as well. So we'll see how this feels. I do not want the bread to fight me. If bread is ever fighting you, then it's actually you that's fighting it. So you need to stop, let it rest, and then come back to it in a few minutes. So if it's tearing or fighting or anything like that, it's time to just set it aside and give it a few minutes to rest, and then come back to it after it's had a moment. This feels good. And as I said earlier, I don't want to make them too long. So even though they're about 500 grams, I don't want anything that's too kind of like ficelle shapes, because I don't want it too long because of those non-gluten flours in here. Don't think it's going to have the body to kind of hang up and stand up to a long shape. So I'm keeping it on what I would consider kind of the shorter side. But this looks pretty good. It felt good. And if you didn't notice earlier, I like to taper baguettes. So of course, you know, if you do this recipe at home or at your bakery, or if you want to work on it yourself, of course, the taper is optional, but I like the aesthetic the taper provides. So I'm going to go ahead and add some tapers to the ends. But I don't think that was more than maybe like a 10-minute rest at the absolute most on the bench for these. So again, the dough's moving pretty quickly because it's warm in here, but also it's been in the walk-in for a good 22 hours since I mixed it yesterday. So I want to move on these. And I don't want them to hang out too long because again, all that hominy grit is really kind of cutting that gluten apart. So the longer I kind of let it do that, the less structure and the less body it's going to have as it ferments. So I want to shape it quick. I want to shape it tight. And I want to keep an eye on it. Yeah, these feel really good. So I'm gonna roll them all out. Do you mind getting a close up? We'll do of the shaping. I'll try to do one of these a little bit slow. I like to do what I call the field goal. So I'm gonna throw the back to the front, or to the middle rather, back of the dough to the middle, and then press it down with the field goal in the middle right here. I'm gonna flip it over. That's the seam I just made, and do the same thing again. Press it down with my thumbs touching, just like a field goal. It's soccer, or I guess football rather. And now I'm going to seal it. So I'm going to put my thumb in between these two flaps and then lightly press down with my palm to make a cylinder. I'm going to make sure it's removed from the table. Maybe run it through a little bit of flour, and then start with one hand in the middle, applying pressure through my wrist to my fingers and press against the dough, press it against the table until I have my achieved length. If I got any stickiness or tackiness, I'll run some extra flour through it, and then I'm going to finish it with my taper. Okay. I think this dough would be really good for like a fondue as well too. So if you wanted to do a fondue, I don't have a rolling pin on hand, but to make a nice fondue when you press the rolling pin down the middle. So I'll make a nice kind of a short one right here. Maybe I'll come back to that and do the fondue or fendant if we don't get around to it. All right, this last one. Okay. All right, so these are the 6 that I shaped. Just hanging out in the couche. As I said, it's pretty hot in the bakery right now. It's 83. It cooled down, thankfully for us, but I would give these probably about an hour, hour and a half at room temp for the final proof before baking. And if you didn't see already, or if you didn't hear, I used steam before I loaded the bread, and then after I loaded the bread as well too. And then I would vent it for, like the last 10 to 15% of the bake. I would vent the bread so it gets a nice crust on it and come out really good. And I think with the sourdough in here, these should last for a good, I'd say these will be good for probably 3 to 4 days, kind of on your kitchen counter in a brown bag. All right. So I think we're getting a little bit close to the kind of time limit. So I'm going to look over my notes and see if there's anything I missed that I wanted to talk about. And then in a few minutes, I'm going to go check the oven with Molly at the camera and see if the baguettes that we loaded are ready to take out. And then, as I said, we'll join over to the VIP lounge for any Q&As that people may have. So give me a sec while I check my notes.
And Grace, this is Peter here, just jumping in to remind people that we'll have a little time for Q&A on this site. We have a couple questions coming in. If you have any for Grayson, type them into the Q&A section on the screen, and I'll feed them to Grayson during the next 15 minutes or so. And then when we go over to the VIP lounge, we can continue that. Those of you who would like to upgrade your ticket to VIP status, it's only a couple extra bucks for that. Use the link that says support, or type an email to question@breadsymposium.com and send that right away. Our tech team will send you the details for how to upgrade, and you might even be able to get into today's VIP session as well. Grayson, back to you.
Thank you, Peter. Yeah, I feel like I kind of hit everything that I wanted to talk about. I ran through the ingredients really well, and I guess did a good job plugging everybody, but really Oliver Farms in Georgia is doing really incredible stuff with those cold pressed oils. And again, they're so fragrant and they're so aromatic and they're so nutritious that it's approximating like a finishing oil. So like a little bit goes a long way. And again, that's why I really promote using the best possible ingredients, because there's nuance and there's integrity in doing a little bit. And I think that simplicity really shines when you have that restraint through simplicity. I think the integrity of the ingredient really is allowed to enunciate itself, and the baker can become a lot more of a shepherd as opposed to somebody that's kind of just pushing all this stuff about themselves or about the flavor of what it is that they're doing at their bakery on top of the bread. I'm really in favor of letting the ingredients speak for themselves. So in that way, the baker becomes, in my estimation, more of like a shepherd, or almost like a trampoline, to allow the ingredients to enunciate themselves and to really tell their own stories through flavor. And that's only achieved, in my opinion, through nuance and through restraint. So that's the hardest thing that I feel like I've kind of faced in my career. Yes, philosophically to an extent, is learning to have that restraint. And, we all get eager and we all want to do so much, but the beautiful thing about bread, which attracted me to bread in the first place, and which still attracts me every single day, is that you can achieve something so unique and so beautiful, yet distinctly different, by doing the same thing every single day with just 3 ingredients. And to me, that ritual and the discipline of that ritual is just something that I've continued to be in love with since I started doing it 12 years ago, and only continue to fall in love with it more and more, especially when I find producers, whether it's here or in other parts of the world, really committed to doing things and making ingredients the old-fashioned way, or with intentions of the old-fashioned way, but looking forward to the future. And obviously the perfect example is what they're doing at Poland and what they did, the factory and everything like that too. So that concept of retro innovation, which Apollonia's father developed, where you kind of have one foot in the past, one foot in the future, and you kind of crab walk your way through the present. That's something that really informs me, inspires me. not just in the baking, but also just kind of conceptually as somebody that loves bread. So with that said, I'm going to have Molly grab the camera and we're all going to walk over to the oven to check the baguettes that I put in there, and then we'll do a few questions when we come back. All right.
While Grayson's going to the oven, it's Peter here jumping in. I'll let you know, those who haven't already seen it, way up in the early part of the chat, I did put in the URL links to Oliver Farm and also to Anson Mills, the two main ingredient companies that Grayson's featuring in his demo today. So you can get those links by going into the chat.
These are a little bit blonde for me. I really like the caramelization on a crust, so I like a nice crust, and I also like a really nice color. But I am going to pull these out of the oven because I got to jump on to answer some questions and then jump into the office for the rest of the presentation. So I'm going to pull these out for now. I mean, they look great, but again, I really like a rich caramelization. So for me, I probably would leave these in for another like 5 to 8 minutes just to kind of get a deeper color, kind of like this one has right here. But these came out great. I mean, really beautiful baguette, a little bit of sourdough, tiny amount of yeast. I mixed a 10-kilo batch of dough and I used 3 grams of yeast for that whole batch. And then the sourdough, as I said, was 4% of the flour weight. So the acidity really sets everything off and really is kind of like the grammar of the flavor, that acidity from the sourdough in the loaf of bread. And I like using a tiny little bit of yeast just to kind of ensure that it has a good body and a good structure to it. And so that the acidity from the sourdough is not so overwhelming, but that there is a little bit of room for those flours and those other flavors to really enunciate themselves. And I like the neutral capacity the yeast lends when leavening bread. So I like to use a little bit of it every now and then. But again, these are vast majority sourdough and it came out really good. So with that said, we'll go back over to the main table and have Peter open it up for questions. And
Grayson, one question came in a minute ago asking if you could return to that sliced loaf and do a close-up of the crumb so that people can see that cross-section, and then we'll continue on from that point. I'm going to turn my camera back on and join you on the screen. And this has been a phenomenal demo. I'll call it a masterclass, really, because there was so much important information that you're not going to see everywhere, but it's certainly the basics, that the hand shaping, the structure of the dough. Look at that, crumb and structure of the internal part of this baguette. And yeah, thanks. That's a great close-up. Love it. And I'm going to throw out the first question. Can you take it from right where you are, Grayson? We'll just do a couple minutes, then we're going to take a 5-minute break so that you can get back into your office for the after party portion of today. The one question that came in was from Marianne. Do Anson Mills and Carolina ground flours, which are 2 small regional mills, does the flour handle the same as King Arthur flour? She says, I baked bread with Carolina ground and the loaves did not rise as high as with King Arthur. Is the issue the flour, or could it be my use of tap water with chlorine, or any other tips on using locally milled flour? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's kind of requires like a huge response. So I'll do my best to kind of do some cliff notes on that question because it's very good. I feel like the first thing that we have to do is we have to reorient our expectations. So we should never expect that whole grain stone milled flour is going to perform, taste, look, smell, store, transport, anything like white flour, no matter where that white flour is coming from. So it's not like diesel and gasoline. It's something completely different in terms of the gap between the two of those. So I think that's the first thing you have to do is kind of reorient your compass and recenter yourself to a different kind of a true north when you're working with whole grain stone milled flours that are freshly ground. So your expectations have to be different. So you're not going to have like a huge loaf of bread that's voluminous and gigantic and it's going to bloom up and be, just like a loaf of Wonder Bread or whatever at the store that's made with all that white flour, because not only is the protein and the minerality and the ash content and the enzyme and all the other stuff that flours have going to be different between white flour and freshly milled flour, but what's going to happen in whole grain freshly milled flour, at least in my estimation of the regional mills that I know in America, is that we're all working with different harvests and different varieties. So everything is identity preserved in that sense, where you're getting hopefully one variety from one harvest. The miller may do a little bit of blending for you to promote a bread flour or a pasta flour or pastry flour, but you have to understand that white flour really is kind of a result of, you know, the commercialization of America, not just its food systems, but I would argue its culture. So white flour is meant to be consistent all the time. So whether it's Chernobyl, whether it's coronavirus, whether it's just another day in August, white flour is always meant to perform the same and to be the same, to taste the same, and to look the same. Whereas whole wheat flour, it's completely different. It's the antithesis of all of that kind of stuff. So that's not meant to say that it should be overwhelming or confusing or difficult. It's just a very different learning curve. So I would say, to answer your question more directly than what I just said, contact the mill and look at their resources about what they recommend for their flours. I know that Jennifer, that owns Carolina Ground, had a really great career as a baker for, I think, quite a while before starting Carolina Ground. So she's obviously a great resource to talk about what's this for. I'm sure they have recipes on their website. And then also Glenn and Anson Mills, they have a beautiful website that's replete with recipes for, I think, pretty much everything they have. So as opposed to trying to plug in a flour that you buy from a regional mill into something that you're used to, I would maybe recommend starting by reaching out to them or looking at their website to match one of their flours with one of their recipes. And as you get used to it, then you can begin incorporating it into a recipe that's your own, that you're more comfortable and you're more familiar with.
Hey, Graison, I got a question before we run out of time. We have to live vicariously through you. The loaves look so amazingly delicious. Is there any chance you could take a bite of that and describe the flavor profile and the textures that are coming through, you know, as you chew them? Because you know, as much as I'd love to just jump on a plane and come down there and dig into one of those loaves, it's not going to happen.
What if I told you this was a pillow just like yours?
Yeah, I love it.
All right. Yeah, I'll do my best. Let me cut a fresh one, because the crumb on this is a little bit dried out because it's been open for quite a while. So I'll cut a fresh slice. I always, when tasting, I went to SFBI for the professional program, and like, of all the incredible things we did over there, that was 10 years ago. I think the best lesson was how to taste bread. So we're never tasting the crust. We're always kind of agitating the crumb, smelling the crumb, and then taking a little pinch of the crumb away from the crust and trying that to really isolate the flavor of the fermentation as opposed to the caramelization of the crust. So a lot of minerality, a lot of grassiness. And then towards the back of the chew, I'm getting the peanut flour, the peanut oil, and the fattiness from that okra oil and the peanut oil as well. And then that really kind of malty, rich, high glucose sweetness from the cane syrup is kind of wrapping the whole flavor all together, as is the salt. So there's like a mild maltiness and a mild malty sweetness kind of wrapping everything together. As I said, that white wheat is very, very mild, the white wheat from Anson Mills. So it's really allowing that kind of corn to shine. And then as I chew, I'm getting those flecks of the hominy grits that are really providing to me a nice texture and a nice mouthfeel. And again, that's why I didn't make a porridge, because I wanted that crunch from the hominy grits as opposed to mellowing them out by creating a porridge. So nice mild sweetness. Again, that sourdough is just kind of omnipresent, tying all those loose knots together. Really good fragrance from the corn. But again, like that little bit of peanut flour at 3%, and then the okra oil and the peanut oil providing a really nice kind of tender mouthfeel, really good aromatics, and then like a really good fattiness at the end. And then I got a little bit of that malty sweetness from the cane syrup.
So I assume that people could probably use a substitute, say, if they were sensitive to peanuts, they could use almond flour or a pecan flour, pecan oils, and things like that in place of the peanut, would you say?
I think that would work well, yeah. And if you don't have access to the cane syrup, I suppose something like a molasses would work, but molasses is so dark that I would maybe pull back a little bit on that, because I don't want
Yeah.
I don't want that to be a little bit too forward. And that's kind of the beauty of cane syrup. It's very, very light, very malty, and it's not too heady and not too forward. I love molasses, but it's a little bit strong.
Well, let's kind of wrap this session up with one final question, and it's from me, and that is simply, we started out talking about this as the Diaspora Baguette. Could you just, again, for those who kind of missed at the beginning, what you mean by that? Why that term Diaspora Baguette in this context?
The Diaspora Baguette, again, not the concept, but the diaspora is the forced expulsion of people for whatever reason from where they come from. So you have ingredients that had a forced expulsion because people were enslaved and forcibly made to leave Africa to come to the Americas for obviously the very terrible reasons that they came here for. And they brought foodways and ingredients with them: rice, bene, sorghum, other things. And then the Native Americans that also had that diaspora. They also contributed, of course, to the foodways and the food shed of our country as well, too. And to an extent, too, the diaspora, not in the same sense of a forced expulsion, but the diaspora of the French tradition of baking throughout the world. So again, it's kind of disrupting and taking the model or the form or the recipe for baguette and using what's around you and what's available to you to make it your own, whether that's your own personal kind of a self-portrait or whether it's a portrait of the ecosystems and the ecology and the area in which you live, or maybe it's a homage to the producers that you work with that are really doing incredible things with our foodways. But again, the concept for me is not just to make a baguette in New Orleans, because it's pretty insipid and pretty uncreative, but how can I make something that's more endemic and more unique, not necessarily to me or to who I am, but to where I'm coming from and to where I am, and to do my best to tell the stories of where those things come from. So using a tried and true model of a baguette and packing it with really unique things to, again, tell a story of everything that came together to make something like this possible. And obviously to make a place as incredible as New Orleans possible as well, too.
That's beautifully said. And I love that framing, guys. It makes me think of the old saying to think globally, but act locally. And yeah. And you've done it, and I really appreciate this brilliant class that you've given us today. What we're going to do in a minute is take a short break. For those of you who want to rejoin in the for the after party, we call it, in the VIP lounge, we'll say in about 5 minutes. Rejoin us there. And if you can, if those of you who are staying on the screen for a while, we're going to run, if you haven't already seen it, we have a little bit of a credit scroll, a thank you scroll at the end of this session. Just a thank you to all the people that have been involved in helping us bring these sessions to you. Graison Gill at Bellegarde Bakery. All the URLs are on the chat. If you get a chance, everybody review the chats for links to the various sources, to the bakery, to even to the mills. And we'll continue this discussion in the VIP lounge. Once again, thank you. Next week, by the way, we do have on Monday, our Monday session will be with Carl de Smet, where he's going to give us a guided personal tour of the Purato Sourdough Library in Belgium, in St. Vith, Belgium. No Wednesday session next week, but then the following week we'll come back, and on Monday, Stephanie Swain of the Modernist Bread book phenomenon is going to take us behind the scenes of Modernist Breads and the new book, Modernist Pizza. And the Wednesday following that, which would be, I believe, June 9th, we have Nikki Justo of Central Milling is going to do a demo showing us what he calls his focaccia slab using sprouted grain. So lots more to come. This was a great way to kick off our Bake Like a Pro series. Graison, thank you. We'll see all of you in a couple of minutes in the VIP lounge, those who can join us. And again, hang in there. We'll see you soon. Graison, thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you to our team behind the scenes. Our event technical and production partners, Ganoid Communications, including our producer, Gurmit Singh, and his team, Jita Gajaria, Gagandeep Singh, and Jaydev Kashari. Thanks also to Ted Nelson and Lael Fretzel. of our creative and marketing team at Gumbo Marketing, and the many folks at Johnson & Wales University who supported me throughout this event. My executive assistant, Sarah Standifer, communications director, Melinda Law, Chancellor Mim Rooney, Charlotte Campus President, Cheryl Richards, and our executive team leaders, deans and faculty, Maureen Dumas, Michael Schrader, Michelle Nicholas, Mark Norman, Brent Steyerwalt, Laurie Heimbach, Jerry Lanuza, Amy Felder, Harry Paymiller, Richard Miskovich, and many, many others. Thank you all.